Mm, 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 mm.
What's good, ladies and gentlemen? It is your boy, Elgin Bailey, aka Big Hell, host of the Page Turners podcast. We are in season 4, episode 6 of our book study, The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power by Dr. Jared A. Ball. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Uh, this is an honor to be here with you. Quick housekeeping. You can find us at Page Turners on all of your favorite social media platforms at Page Turners BST on Instagram, Page Turners BTM on YouTube, and please subscribe to our Patreon, Page Turners BTM. Also, you can find me on Facebook, Page Turners BLK. One quick note about our Patreon. For all of our patrons, we appreciate you. Thank you for being a part of what we're building here. And remember, 50% of all of our Patreon dollars goes to the Page Turners Book Club, where I will be taking those funds and buying books and handing them out to the community. I just want to say thank you guys for tuning in again. And without further ado, I'm not going bullshit. I am going to jump right into what I have going on today. Um, and ba-da-ba-ba-ba. We are currently in chapter 3 of The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power, again by Dr. Jared A. Ball. And I read: the concept of buying power comes originally from government statistics generated by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS. In fact, the definitive history of the Bureau, the first 100 years of the Bureau of Labor Statistics by Goldman and Moy, 1985, quite surreptitiously has at its literal opening line, here it is, family. This volume reports the first century of a government agency whose founders hoped that by publishing facts about economic conditions, the agency would help and end strife between capital and labor. A bit further, it is explained that the BLS itself is an extension of a bill signed by the 21st president of the U.S., Chester A. Arthur. What? Which established the Bureau of Labor within the Department of Interior on June 27th, 1884, in partial response to the provisions 2 decades which had seen, man, this is crazy, has seen vast changes in the American economy and society. A truly national economy was developing, epitomized by the transcontinental railroads. Industry was attracting increasing numbers of unskilled workers recruited from among the immigrants, freedmen, women, and children into the urban centers. And with the emergence of the industrial worker, unemployment, slum conditions, and labor unrest were all on the rise. Boy, the arsenal deployed nationally to address the increased class disparities, which developed as a new economy and society emerged in decades following the Civil War, included the idea that the dissemination of information about economic realities would help politicians and business owners manage them, specific to buying power. BLS studies would eventually develop to include, here's a key part here, ladies and gentlemen, cost of living studies meant to assess the exact value of money earned by working people to determine how much of what was available for purchase that money can buy. Again, really important. We're defining what buying power actually is, because still, a number of folks believe and hold to the idea that buying power is money, that you can actually do some things with buying power. And I read, Out of those studies came direct focus on purchasing power, which has never been about assessing the strength or potential of the working people to overcome poverty or a depressed class position. From the start, purchasing buying power has been meant as a measurement of what workers could buy and a measurement by which leaders of business and government could work in unison to assure that workers' wages were low enough to assure maximum profit for ownership while sufficient enough to buy what was produced. Striking such a balance will bring societal peace and, equally important, uninterrupted proper function of business. This is the true definition of buying power. And listen up, fam. This is the true definition of buying power. A measurement of how much working people can buy with money they earn from their work. The definition of buying power is a measurement of how much working people can buy with the money they earn from their work. The very purpose of taking the initial measurement was to gauge how much working people earned, how much that money could pay for, and at what point the gap between the two could lead to further rebellion. Keeping as low as possible the gap between what workers were paid and what that money can actually afford was seen from the start as essential to balancing inherent tensions between capital's desire to replicate itself as a wealth for a tiny few and work required from a largely impoverished and powerless class of working people to produce that wealth. Initially, the politics of buying power projections were clearly understood by a more vibrant, organized, and loud labor movement of the time. The first report in 1904 claimed the previous decade or so witnessed hourly wage increases outpace increases in the price of food, meaning there had been an increase in purchasing power of the hourly wage, 5.4%. Immediately, there were sharp reactions as many raised concerns over method, politics, and a set of rosy outcomes that did not match the lived experience of those facing industrial unrest and strikes due to layoffs, wage reductions, and reduced purchasing power following the panic of 1903. So, again, doubling back real quick to reiterate the definition of buying power. Buying power, again, is a measurement of how much working people can buy with the money they earn from their work. Really important that we grab that definition, man. And I read, from the very beginning, the optimistic claims of buying power did not match the actual economic realities of the day, and specifically of those most negatively affected by any misrepresentations of fact. From the start, politics and methodology behind the development of purchasing power claims was challenged. However, today they are taken as unquestioned and even inherent to any process of advancing economic, political, and social conditions of at least one segment of oppressed communities. Okay? I read, how then did we get from working people initially and correctly identifying the emptiness of a claim of power associated with the consumption to a point today where not only are these critiques largely disappeared, but in particularly within Black America, there is an outright and vigorously defended acceptance of these claims that buying power is real and an essential component of a nearly and always potential collective rise. One part of that answer is in the previous mentioned business traditions developed upon immediately following enslavement and promoted by evolving class of Black entrepreneurs. The development of separate Black communities with seemingly separate economies suggested the real ability for some to achieve degrees of income and wealth, but it was the ability of the Black business class to project that possibility to the whole, which continues to confound understanding and subsequent planning. The greater part of the answer as to how we got here is found in the post World War II shift in national and black targeted media messaging, most of which would come directly from black business and media ownership class itself. As an extreme subset of a broad and deeply ingrained national concern with potential strife caused by an increasing national divide among class lines and exploited labor, Black America would be targeted with marketing specific to claims of buying power in the years following World War II, meant to appease the needs of attracting ad revenue and to lower the volume of social unrest. Some of this was done to capture the relatively few dollars emanating from a black community, a bit better off after a budgeting war economy was forced to make some room for black labor. Some of this was done to mitigate increasing political protests, which included many black soldiers returning from the war, seeking their rights at home so vigorously defended by black press, a well known double V campaign, Victory for the Allies Overseas and Victory for Black Civil Rights in the United States. And included in those rights was the right also defended by the commercial black press and right to relatively conservative business and middle class aspirations and matching politics. One of the key components to this is the rise of the desire for ads to be placed in black markets, family. We've seen this. We've seen this after George Floyd's assassination. We saw the outpouring of so-called support from these major companies who immediately began to do all sorts of things to show that they were a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. So you had all of these big companies, Spotify, Amazon, you name it, they were doing something to show black folks that they were down with the cause, right? So you saw what? You saw Apple Music, have social social protest playlists. You had the whole blackening of screens and things along that lines from different media platforms. That was a way not only to show support or to show that they were down with the cause, but it was also a way to generate what? Money. Because when people, black people specifically, saw that these companies were down for the cause, we were more likely to engage in them with our money. You feel me? Okay. And I read, the precedent of promoting an entrepreneurial class consciousness took new form with a previous unprecedented black owned and black targeting media as a driving force. Rather than supporting calls from among black political movements for radical redistribution of an existing tremendous national wealth, power was redefined away from political power and redistribution and toward consumption. For example, singularly influential black media owner John H. Johnson, that name should ring a bell to some of y'all, famously of Ebony and Jet, took to promoting what would one day be the form of black power rebranded by Richard Nixon as entrepreneurialism and consumption, and helped develop an approach to capturing black consumers which remains dominant today. Johnson produced The Secret of Selling the Negro, a brilliant marketing video which in 1954 launched an updated approach to black business tradition of political struggle, one focused on economics and not on politics, and with an emphasis on attracting white corporate advertising money. With a powerful media arm at his disposal and a keen awareness of how to move black people, Johnson was able to package and deliver a message of middle class, aspirational black pride, one attractive to many within black America, and as with many within white business circles. For Johnson and others within the black elite, racism was not a problem that was endemic to American society. Instead, it was a temporary shortcoming that could be overcome through expanded interracial understanding, Gentile public comportment, and veritable desegregation of free market. In order for this to happen, though, white economic power brokers had to be made aware of the gold mine in their backyard. From Johnson, these influential businessmen needed to learn the secret of selling the Negro and recognize that they stood to benefit from a full incorporation and unrestricted participation of African Americans in the African free market. Johnson assured white corporate interests that capitalist competition and robust consumerism were goods for everybody, even African Americans suffering under the heel of Jim Crow. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Listen, man. What? And you can go and you can actually watch The Secret of Selling the Negro. You can watch it on YouTube. Every now and then I see somebody post it and share it on social media. I see it making its rounds through and through. Uh, so you can watch it. But I think the thing that people don't understand is when they post it, they assume that white people or white media apparatus or the state have put this out. They don't understand that John H. Johnson, famously of Ebony and Jet magazines, was the one who created this. And I read, the selling of the Negro could be read today as the blueprint for a two-pronged marketing formula developed to both sell an audience on the concept of Black power and to sell that same Black audience to the largest white companies within the largest advertising budgets. The original 1954 video depicts a Black population quite inconsistent with the reality of evolving political struggles themselves, escalating into what would emerge as a civil rights movement, and known by many around the world to be the Black contribution to international anti-colonial and anti-imperialist movements. The Johnson video promotes Black America as anything but increasingly hostile revolutionaries. Anything but hostile revolutionaries. It didn't push and show that there were people, our ancestors on the ground, who were pushing for redistribution of wealth. It made us look as if we were simply looking to have a fair share of the money. And that if we can just be entrepreneurs, if we can just be pulling ourselves up by the bootstrap, if we can just start businesses and all that other type shit, then we would actually be equal footing, because racism was not the problem. That was endemic to American society, remember? Instead, it was just a shortcoming. And I read, instead, the propagandized view of Black America presented by Johnson was good as any the propaganda of the day developed and distributed around the world by the United States Department to promote a fictitious national racial harmony. Just like the Black entertainers sent around the world during the 1950s as part of an effort by the United States to project an image of itself abroad as free, democratic, and absent racial conflict, the Johnson product showed a Black community enjoying a growing economy at home and becoming its own powerful consumer base, ready to have an increased income targeted by advertisers. Shit is treacherous, man. Treacherous. And I read, the first scene of The Secret of the Negro, Selling the Negro, is of a very white business suited Bob Trout reading the latest news release on his teletype, informing him that the Secretary of Commerce announced a quadrupling of wages earned. The average Negro, Trout then excitedly walks off to share the good news. That good news, as he explained, is good for business, not black communal economic strengths or needs, and that there is an untapped resource or a fresh neglected market of the black consumer worth 15 billion in spending. And a few minutes later, minute mark 344 to be exact, is the utterance of the famous claim, this time given sound and visuals with the talented, attractive black actors becoming its weaponized, propagated form of buying power. That shit is ancestral treason, my man. You hear what I'm saying? And I read. Even more telling is that the secret includes, as a first hand report on the matter of black buying power, a statement from then head of the Department of Commerce, Sinclair Weeks, which also initiated a continuing trend of confusing the definition of meaning in black buying power by attaching the concept entirely to income. Weeks says, the tremendous buying power of black people is backed, of course, by an increased earning power. The average Negro's family income is at a record high. As a whole, the entire Negro market has a total income of about $15 billion. When you get some time, family, take a look online. Use your Googles, use your Siris, use whatever you have, and Google the median income of blacks in America right now. Okay? Just take a minute and do your Googles. Okay? And I read, Weeks goes on to further solidify the frame or approach upon which future claims will be based, namely that this buying power is seen in how much black people spend on household goods, music, cosmetics, and food. Because when you hear about black buying power, fam, that's what people tend to incorrectly define buying power as. They incorrectly define buying power on how much black people spend on household goods, music, and cosmetics. And I read, Weeks also lays the groundwork for extrapolating a buying power from increased black college enrollment and income variables known now, though not as heavily reported, to be irrelevant to closing black white income and wealth inequalities. Damn. This is buying power in its most honest form, not an assessment of actual economic conditions of African American, but rather buying power is shown by Johnson's video as merely an abstract claim to attract white corporate advertising dollars to be spent in black media outlets. I'm going to read that one more time for you. Buying power is shown by Johnson in the video as merely an abstract claim to attract white corporate advertising dollars to be spent in black media outlets. The heavily promoted but unreal claims of economic vitality among consumers help turn buying power as a concept from largely an empty branding or marketing mechanism meant to help shift white corporate ad dollars to black media to one whereby black consumers are magically metaphors into a non-threatening, fully American, and economically determined market. And guess what? It worked. It worked. And I read, so well, in fact, that among ad industry historians, Selling the Negro is held as one of the top 10 industrial films of all time. Not because it was particularly good, but because it was amazingly effective. It would be just the first salvo in an increasing confrontational campaign of ads and tactics Johnson would use over the next decades to challenge and prod mainstream advertisers into moving ad budgets into black pop publications, or at least his black publication. Man, that sounds like Byron Allen, don't it? It sounds like Byron Allen suing McDonald's, right? Doesn't that sound like what he? Oh, okay. Woo! And I read the Johnson Media product meant again only to wed white corporations and advertisers with black consumers. Concretes concretizes beautifully how the myth of black buying power was developed and how it has been particularly deployed targeting black audiences. The title is itself wonderfully explanatory. The secret was to convince white advertisers to spend money in black Johnson owned media spaces, then also to convince both black and white America that such myth promulgation would be the requisite solution to increasingly material inequality. That if black folks were able to buy more products and get more ad revenues from white advertisers, racial inequality would begin to no longer be an issue, which we know is absolute bullshit. And I read, and finally, the film's secret was to convince black people themselves that consumption is itself power or is a pathway to power. I'm going to read that again. And finally, the film's secret was to convince black people themselves that consumption itself is power or a pathway to power. It is indeed the black community again in a two-pronged approach being sold to white advertisers and then again being sold on the concept that black buying power is economic strength. In fact, today it is a core feature of black commercial media seeking to attract the largest sums possible from the largest white corporate sponsors. To make plain, their ability to deliver consumers in exchange for huge advertising dollars, which again, nationally, by the top 200 ad buyers alone, was 163 billion in 2018. The mythic reference to and rise of the initial 15 billion in buying power to now more than 1 trillion has become a key feature of black commercial media and has been carried throughout every segment of the black political spectrum, penetrating deep into the collective black political subconscious. It's everywhere. Today, however, as buying power is said to increase the clarity regarding methods used to reach those conclusions decreases, unlike the original conception, where at least weeks connects the 15 billion claim directly and exclusively to earned income, as will be shown. Today, that 1 trillion claim is further unmoored in reality and derived from far more murky methods tied only to projections, expectations, and extrapolations. It stands to reason that the Johnson Company marketing product would succeed, given that the post war era was one of immense developments in study and deployment of propaganda in the United States. New media strategies needed to be developed to manage what was also a moment of increased participation by Black people in the workforce, and in both a desire to be included in and to radically change the country's economic, political, and social landscape. Every time I read Dr. Ball's work, I want to give him all the flowers for the hard work and that he's put in dealing and addressing this myth. And I read, the wreckage of the Second World War left the United States as a single dominant world power, and Black people looking for a new role within that new world arrangement were confronted in part, by new national messaging. The propaganda developed in the post war era was itself repurposed psychological warfare meant as the communicative parallel to the economic shift in the country from military production to civilian consumption. And the exact same methods were used. In fact, the Great Allied Campaign to celebrate democracy, etc., was a venture so successful, it seemed so noble, that it suddenly legitimized such propagandists who, once the war had ended, went right to work messaging or exciting various publics on behalf of entities like General Motors, Procter and Gamble, John D. Rockefeller, and General Electric. Further, explains Nancy Snow, there is no other country in the world that matches the United States for developing such close links between commerce and the business of government. For instance, Edward Bernays, who rebranded propaganda as a public relations after World War II to divorce the latter from its connections via the war to Nazi Germany, was fast developing a post war method of rebranding the concepts of capitalism and democracy as being extricably linked. His position as a leading corporate marketer and nephew to Sigmund Freud situated him perfectly as one interested in his uncle's study of mass psychology to use that research to manipulate people into becoming good consumers. Read, perpetually unhappy and unfulfilled. Good consumers, perpetually unhappy and unfulfilled. Barnes understood the power of public opinion and that it should be those who made him rich for promoting theirs who would wield such power. He also understood the need to target emotion, not logic, to get best results. To target what? Emotion, not logic. Woo! He also understood the need to target emotion, not logic. Damn it. I'm going to read this last paragraph, family, and then we're going to be done for the day. And I read, the creation of citizen consumers required his post World War II work of conceptually collapsing into one, capitalism, democracy. Once capitalism as an idea was wedded forever to democracy, the new arrangement meant consumption would not only bring the promise of self fulfillment, but would become an implicit expression of patriotism and freedom. Shopping meant being free, and being free meant shopping. Barnes, as is done today at levels he could have only dreamed possible, didn't simply sell products, but capitalism itself. He directed the publicity for the 1939 New York World Fair, which themed the democracy, explicitly linking democracy and capitalism together in a utopian vision of the future. Barnes foresaw the enthusiasm that now greets the release of every incrementally modified Apple product, says Donner. We shifted from a culture in which people said behave and conform to a culture in which people said indulge yourself, enjoy yourself, that spurs capitalism. And Freud's nephew truly believed that preying on such desires to encourage spending was key to a functioning democracy. He thought the elite should be able to manipulate the masses into feeding the economy with their many purchases. I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to end right there. I got to stop right there. Lord have mercy. I man, I just want to read that last sentence for y'all before I wrap it up, man. He thought the elite should be able to manipulate. He thought the elite should be able to manipulate the masses into feeding the economy with their purchases. Damn. 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 Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of the Page Turners Podcast with your host, Big L. We are in season 4, episode 6, reading Dr. Jared A. Ball's The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. Till next time, I'm out.